Hello everybody, this is the Starving Martian and today is Martian Monday. Unless of course you've stumbled upon this video on either of the other 6 days of the week, in which case enjoy anyway. Today we begin our in-depth look at the Mars Attacks comic books produced by Topps Comics. These comics came out, the ones we're looking at right now, in 1994, so that puts it 2 years before the movie by director Tim Burton would come out. Now, we've taken a very brief look at some of these before. I did a review on the collected editions, Mars Attacks Classics, volumes 1 through 3, but that was more of a very basic overview of what each volume contained, and I didn't get into the story, the characters, anything like that. And so we're beginning today on issue 1 of the miniseries, and not even the main story. We're looking at the 6-page backup story. Now, each of these comics for the first 5 issues, which was a miniseries, as I said, had the main story, and then you would flip it around to get the backup. So here's the cover of the main issue. You can see the Martian redesign, Mars Attacks logo, and then you would flip your book upside down to read the backup stories. And the reason we're doing the backup stories first is because the backup stories actually take place in the 1960s, around the same time that the Mars Attacks trading cards themselves were actually published in our reality. Now, if this cover seems familiar to you, if you've been watching my channel for a while, it might be because it was reproduced on a trading card. This is from Mars Attacks Archives, and I've already done a review on that card set, but yeah, they included several of the covers, and many of these covers from these Topps issues ended up on later trading cards, so they will begin to seem familiar to you. So why are we doing the backup stories first? Well, like I said, it takes place in the 60s. They set the stage for what's to come, and this one in particular tells the story of how and why Mars is attacking in the modern day 1994 era. So before we get into the comic itself, let me remind you of this beauty here, the Garden of Peace. This card is also from Mars Attacks Archives, and it's card number 56. Now, the original card series only ran up to 55. Archives included the unpublished 11. This one's particularly interesting because it's the first time you see an official picture of what will become known in this comic book as the Payax. You see these two Martians here? They look like your standard typical Martians, except they have an eyeball on a stalk. The Payax in the comic books look substantially different, as you can see. But the idea of a Martian with a third eye goes all the way back to the pre-production sketches of what the Martians might look like when they were developing the card series. So this here shows 3 Payax, who look, again, they look different than what we'll see in the Topps comics, but remember, this doesn't follow the comic book continuity, but rather the trading card continuity. We see a mother and father. The mother there has kind of a come hither kind of look on her face, and the kid's running off in the background, and he seems to be about to get the Varia suit upgrade, and that's all well and good. There also seems to be eyeballs growing on trees, but whatever. Alright. So the back of this card. Now, I didn't read these going through them because it would have taken way too long, but this is particularly interesting going into the Topps comic series. For centuries, the Earth has been observed by the Payax, a peaceful tribe of Martians. Known as compassionate and intellectual race, the Payax envisioned a sharing of culture and technology with their closest neighbors. Extremely talented, Payax used advanced cloning technologies to turn Martian wasteland into lush outposts of flora and fauna splendor. Loyal to a fault, the Payax were monogamous and dedicated to family values. It was through these values that the Payaks hoped to solve the problems threatening the very existence of the planet Mars. A failed attempt to peacefully make contact with the planet Mars resulted in the dominance of the warlike Nard tribe. The Nards were the driving force behind the attack on planet Earth. So, the Martians you all know and love with their big brain heads and skull faces, those are Nards. And I made... I like that name. I've made the joke before, I'll make it again. Martians got nards. Alright, so that kind of sets the stage here. Who are the Payaks? They're a more peaceful race of Martians. There's something going on Mars. There's some catastrophe building. In the card series of Mars, the planet itself was going to explode. We'll find out there's different reasons behind the invasion in the comics. The interesting thing, though, is that you'll notice this credit down here. These comics were actually written, the backup stories at least, by Len Brown. Why is that significant? If you know your Mars Attacks, Len Brown wrote all the copy on the back of the original 55 cards. So now he's coming back in the 90s, 30 years later, to continue the saga. Unfortunately, and I say this with every bit of respect owed to Len Brown. I deeply respect the man. I have a card, a Mars Attacks card signed by him, and it's one of my most treasured pieces in my Mars Attacks collection. But unfortunately, much like George Lucas returning to the Star Wars universe, the results are not always what you would hope for. And any one of us who's written a story, and I've done this myself, written stories, poems, whatever, and gone back and tried to update or alter them later, they're very seldom as good as the original version. And I do have some story problems with this particular 6-page that we're about to get into. But I do want to say I love this cover. This is the cover I have it displayed on the backer board. The other one's facing backwards. So let's get right into it and see exactly why Mars attacks. Alright. Now every comic book series that they come out with, they have to come up with new reasons why Mars attacks. Alright? Comic books, trading cards, movies, they all have their own interpretation of exactly why Mars is attacking. My personal favorite is the movie version, where the Martians are just jerks, and they want to troll us, and they're getting their kicks out of blowing us up. If there's any more reason, I don't believe they mistook the dove as anything. I think they were clearly coming to blow us up, just for the kicks of it. But here we are told that in the middle of the 20th century, Earth scientists debated the possibility of life on the fourth planet Mars. Most thought Martian life was fantasy, created by storytellers, and existing only in the minds of H.G. Wells, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Ray Bradbury, and their followers. Of course, they were wrong. And we are quickly introduced to the leader of the Payaks and the leader of the Nards. And this may well be a character we'll come to know as Komodov, because this is set like 30 years earlier. I can't be sure, but he does have the same distinctive cheekbones as Komodov does. He's not named in this. In fact, it's not even named in the main series. But we see here that the Payak here, in the comics, they only have the one eye. These eyes are like atrophied after generations. He's hoping for a peaceful first encounter with Earth. He's sending 3 squads to Earth to contact us, including his own firstborn son, who will lead. The Nard warns him that Earthlings are enemies, barbarians, that nothing good can come of this. But, all we are saying is give peace a chance. So this mothership is launched, and from the mothership comes 3 nice, traditional-looking Mars Ataxian UFOs, which head down to Earth. Now, this is where I start having problems with the story, because you would think, having this great technology that they have and knowledge of us, that they would know where to send their delegates to. Later on in the Topps comics, you'll hear Martians, casually reference obscure British traders during World War II. And, if they know our history this much, they shouldn't be sending their delegates to, like, the Amazon jungles. Which they do. So, these three here immediately get ambushed by some tribesmen. Says, curious eyes survey the scene with satisfaction. Descendants of these Indians will tell and retell the events of this day for generations to come. So these guys here has never even seen outsiders come this deep into their jungle, and they see Martians and throw spears at them. And 1 out of 3 dead. This next group here on this page, which parallels the cover, although they're obviously drawn different. Down in Louisiana, we get this hick hillbilly family who apparently have witnessed a UFO crashing. You can't even blame Earth on this one, guys. You crashed. Anywho, the father decides to go and burn the Martians to get rid of them. Don't want no stinking alien varmints on his land. He probably doesn't want government troops tramping all over it either. So we're not going to be warned about these guys. He does mention that his fire trap worked. I don't know what that means, because this panel here seems to tell me that the aliens crashed. If anybody knows what a fire trap is, I don't know if he captured them in some kind of weird barbecue pit. But my reading of it is just that they crashed and he burned all the evidence so that he wouldn't have feds trampling all over his property. Next, we have a UFO flying over Soviet airspace. Soviets assume it's American, and that, we're the aggressors here because we're in their airspace, and they're perfectly justified in toasting them. And kawoof, kaboom, that's the end of that. I've read through this a couple times. I can't pinpoint which of these three the PAX leader's son was a part of. I believe it was the first tribe that got killed by the Amazons. I could be wrong. So we return to space. As the space ark approaches Mars, it sends word ahead of the death of the leader's firstborn, as well as all his patriots. You PAX have always been dreamers. I warned you. Perhaps now you will allow us to eradicate those vermin that you sought to embrace. And yeah, the PAX kind of going over to his side at this point. I had hoped for an alliance between our worlds. I wanted to teach them, to learn from them. Instead, I lost a son. My heart is broken. Those barbarians had their chance and they rejected us. Our next visit to the third world will be different. We'll send our full flotilla? That's a word. With our most terrible weapons. This line puzzles me. We will meet their treachery head on. They will pay a terrible price for their deeds, and I promise you, my dear departed son, they will die screaming. Now he says, my dear departed son, which would lead you to believe it was the PAX saying this, but the bubble seems to be pointing up to the wearer of this sleeve, which looks more like the Nard saying that. Is it possible that his son was on one of these missions? I only saw PAX, but then again, we didn't see who was in the ship that crashed. That would give him a personal stake in this. Personally, I think it's the PAX saying this, and the word bubble is just hard to decipher. But now Nard and PAX alike are anti-Earthling, and when the battle comes, it's going to be fierce. But it won't be for a little while because we still have more backup features to cover, and we'll address more of those next week. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this look at the very beginnings of the Topps Comics from Mars Attacks. This has been the Starving Martian. We'll catch you next time. Keep watching the skies.